A New World Order, Chapter 1, John Thraus, Apocalypse Daytime, ADT-1. This is a story about the end of civilization as we know it today. The end did not come as a mighty hammer of justice. Instead, it came as a thief in the early hours of the morning. No one was prepared. Whole areas of the country and perhaps the world were wiped out, changing the course of human history in one moment of unbelievable, unrecognizable evolution of death and destruction. To the characters in the following events, it arrived like rolling thunder and rain upon the flat prairie grass of the Midwest. First, a drop here, then a drop there, with dark clouds roiling across the sky, intent upon cleansing and reviving the world. Unbelievably, going unnoticed by the masses until the twisting winds of change had taken hold of the boundaries of improbability, swept away the old world of humanity, and ushered in a new world order. A new world order of a making no man or woman would desire. A new world order bound by the laws of chaos, destruction, pain, and death.
John, I am going out for a couple of hours with Coralie. I should be back by 4.
Okay. See you then, sweetheart. I was in my office mulling over a prior conversation with an associate. It was disturbing as she mentioned there were rolling blackouts in Colorado, moving swiftly east and west. However, nothing was mentioned on the net or the television. It seemed odd that none of the major news agencies had reported on it yet. What was going on? I looked out the window to a darkening sky, overcast with rain-drenched clouds of hurricane potential. It was July in South Florida, and the heat was becoming unbearable. Thank God for air conditioning. I scanned the various news agencies again to see if there was any news on the blackouts, but nothing came up. I visited the blog sites and found people asking about Denver, Salt Lake, and Kansas City. It seemed the problem was swiftly becoming a crisis. I called Andrew, my brother, in San Francisco to find out if he had heard anything, but he didn't have any updates. Something was not right. An uneasy feeling crept down from the back of my head and settled into the pit of my stomach. Nervous anxiety started fueling my mind to race along paths of suppositions and guesses that delved into probabilities that became more and more outlandish. I shook my head and got up for a drink of water, contemplating the cause and effect of the rolling blackouts. Maybe it was nothing, just overworked utilities trying to compensate for increased demand, but all at once, moving in all directions? That did not bode well. I loved my country but feared my government. Hence, I did not trust what the possibilities could, would, or perhaps be. Governments were comprised of people like me who were prone to mistakes. Also, when power-hungry individuals assumed a position of massive influence, they tended to become dictatorial. Additionally, when problems arose, the volume of lies became more pronounced and the liars more shrill. Because of that perception, Hannah and I made sure we were always prepared for various situations. But how was I to know the depths of the disaster to come and the reversal of life and civilization? The feeling of unease in my stomach also became an itch at the back of my head, prompting me to take action. 2 hours later, I did not know exactly what action to take, but it seemed appropriate first to call Hannah and ask her to come home. I then went to my firearms safe, took out my M14 and CZ858, and cleaned them. I pulled out my Desert Eagle pistol and 2 Glock 45s tucked away in the back and laid them all out on the kitchen table, looking at them with a frown on my face. Am I becoming paranoid and jumping to conclusions? Is this it? The end? I thought to myself. I went out to the garage and checked the pickup to ensure it was fully charged, which it was, thank goodness, and then went back inside to recheck the blog sites. More chatter was coming online as the blackouts continued to move east and west. Now, reports were coming in of people fleeing areas ahead of some problem. It seemed to be moving extremely fast. What was happening? I checked the news agencies, and still, nothing was reported. A healthy dose of skepticism never harmed anyone. So I picked up the phone and called Hannah again, urging her to come home. Hannah walked through the front door, asking,
John, what is wrong? You seemed anxious on the phone.
She slipped out of her sandals and walked toward the kitchen, stopping at the table to look quizzically at the contents. She stared at me with a question that I could not seem to answer. Look here and tell me what you think. She read the blogs and leaned back in the chair, studying my face with that look of cross-examination that I was so familiar with when she thought I was blasting out of this world and on into the cold emptiness of space. Yes, we were very different. However, we were very much the same. Hannah was my rock, stable and steady. The gravitational pull kept both of my feet firmly planted on terra firma, and I was her creative probability and fascination, keeping her intellectually stimulated and interested in what was around each corner. We had that connection cultivated over years of understanding each other as we worked through problems and issues that inevitably arose in any relationship. I loved Hannah with all my heart. Doesn't it seem odd to you? The blackouts were moving across the Midwest, and no news agency was reporting it. The government was saying nothing. Doesn't that ring a bell, my dear?
John, have you been reading those conspiracy sites again? I'm sure the government will issue an alert soon and address the problem. Let's put dinner together. I'm really hungry. Would you mind getting some wine while I prepare dinner?
She smiled and stood up, walking towards the kitchen again, ignoring the armory lying on the table.
Oh, and please put your guns away, Captain Military.
I sighed and did as she asked, then jumped in the truck and drove to the grocery store to pick up the wine. I turned on Sirius Satellite and went to my favorite talk radio station to see if it had anything to say.
This is your Sirius Radio host Elijah Lee, back from the netherworld of advertisements and coffee breaks to bring you some interesting news that seems to be emanating from the Midwest of this great country of ours. I have opened the lines up for callers to share their stories. For all you listeners out there wanting the real scoop on what is happening in Denver, Salt Lake, and Kansas City. Yes, you're on the air, caller. Go ahead.
Elijah announced, flicking a toggle switch with a practiced flick of his thumb.
My brother from Denver called me yesterday and said there were riots in the streets. Mobs of people were running around the city, setting everything on fire. He seemed worried. I told him to relax. The state and federal governments would initiate a state of emergency and send in the National Guard.
Whoa, okay.
He then called me again this morning and said no one had come, and fighting had broken out with mobs of people killing innocent men, women, and children. He was terrified, and I told him to pack his family up and come to California as fast as possible. I tried calling him again on his home and cellular phone, but there was no answer. Why hasn't the government initiated a state of emergency? I haven't heard anything on any of the news channels. What is going on?
Wow! Now that is news, my friend. I don't have the answers for you. Next caller, please. You are on the air.
Yes, it's the same in Kansas City as well. My mother mentioned that the power was out, there were no police or firefighters, and mobs of people were moving throughout the city, killing anyone they found. What the hell is going on? I am going to drive up there to get my mother. I'll keep you posted.
At that, I shut the radio off and turned into the grocery store parking lot deep in thought. The lot was pretty full for a mid-afternoon Tuesday. People were walking with purpose in and out of the store, announcing their intent without saying a word. It was oddly quiet as well. I went into the store and found it to be packed with shoppers pushing carts full of food and other necessities. I grabbed a cart as well and started shopping with a purpose. Alarmed, I bought 3 carts full of necessities and then raced home. I backed into the garage and shut off the motor, sweat pouring off my forehead at a steady clip. I took all the groceries out and placed them on the floor of the garage, readying them to be organized for either a prolonged siege or flight. I walked into the kitchen to be welcomed by an aroma of spices that instantly made my mouth salivate.
Wash your hands, I don't want my cooking ruined.
Hannah ordered, and I obediently went to the washroom to clean up. She was a masterful cook. She could turn anything into a gourmet meal that would not only satisfy the belly, but also tease and intrigue the palate. The table was set, and we sat down to the feast. After saying grace, I poured the wine and cut the meat. "My dear, have you been listening to the radio?"
No, I've been making dinner. Why do you ask?
She thoughtfully looked into my eyes with an unmistakable glint, indicating a desire for more than just conversation, food, and wine, which, of course, being a man, did not go unnoticed. There has been rioting and mob violence in Denver, Salt Lake, and Kansas City. The police, fire, and government are all out of service, power, and water. Something desperate is happening, and the government isn't saying anything to alert the public.
Really? That is surprising. You would think it would be in the news?
She said with a growing anxiety that was beginning to match my own.
What do you think we should do?
I bought 3 carts of food, water, first aid, and other necessities when I went to the grocery store. I thought it better to be prepared. Let's get our gear ready just in case.
Okay, fine. But let's begin after dinner. And perhaps...
She left unsaid my very thoughts. After dinner, we sat in the living room watching the news. Eventually, Hannah moved out of her lazy boy recliner and stood before me. Her dress flowed along the lines of her figure to play with the visual senses in a way that accentuated her feminine outline to a heightened sense of pleasure that took my breath away. The flush of her skin as she looked at me with eyes so blue the sky peered through in amazement, displaying a love that was a devotion tied with a deep sense of trust, respect, and love. She picked up the sides of her dress to reveal the smooth curvature of her legs while she playfully danced. The blood rushed through my veins with a spike of desire that craved her with all my being, all my soul, all my life. She came to me and kissed me tenderly, pulling away as I reached for her, laughing with a smile of relaxed playfulness. She was a beautiful woman, thin red lips, milk-white skin, bright blue eyes, and golden blonde hair topping off the curvature of her breasts, hips, and legs to culminate into a beauty that turned the heads of men and women alike. That was an ongoing occurrence when I was with her. At first, it was difficult to get used to. Most importantly, she loved me, and I could see it in her eyes as she danced, flipping her hair back and forth to the beat of the music, life, and the flight of fancy.
Chapter 2. John Throus, ADT-0.
The next day, we awoke with a start to banging on the front door, with police sirens wailing down the street to staccato sounds of intermittent fireworks going off, or so I thought. I sat up in bed and pulled my slippers on, while at the same time trying to pull my housecoat over my shoulders. The banging increased in urgency as I approached the door. I looked through the peephole and could see my neighbor, Rick, furiously pounding away while surveying the front yard with a very serious and anxious look on his face. I opened the door to almost be rapped full-knuckled on the forehead.
Oh, John, sorry. Where have you been? I've been calling and trying to get in touch with you for over 3 hours now. Have you looked at the news yet this morning?
He asked, fully out of breath and scared beyond belief. We've been here the whole time, just had the phones shut off, and I guess the earplugs work pretty well. No, we haven't watched any news this morning. Why? What's up? I asked with a growing sense of anxiety and fear.
It's happening, John.
What is?
The apocalypse as foretold in the Bible. The unrepentant will pay. Yes, sir, they will pay.
What? What are you talking about, Rick? What apocalypse? I asked as I looked around the neighborhood for signs of what he was saying and found nothing but row upon row of middle-class houses, palm trees, and manicured lawns. Everything seemed to be just fine, as it should be.
Here, let me show you,
he said as he shouldered his way into the living room and turned on the television to Fox News. I looked at him and then at the screen as he adjusted the volume, listening intently.
This is Robert Bradshaw reporting live from Denver. Behind me are the remnants of a once beautiful and vibrant city, full of life and opportunity. Now, a diseased and dead city of fleeing refugees panicked beyond any rationale. Reports have come in recently of savage attacks by single and multiple groups of psychotic people who seem animated by something other than basic human needs and desires. Look over there.
The camera swung to the right and zoomed in on two groups of people, each standing in front of the other. The larger of the two began an encirclement of the smaller group as it tried to back itself up against the wall of an adjacent building. With a rush of deadly intent, the larger group encircled the prey and utterly ravaged them. The camera zoomed in further to disclose the cannibalism of the larger group as it killed, dismembered, and ate its victims.
Oh my God! Did you see that? Oh my God, they are eating their victims. What is going on? Oh my God, oh my God. We need to leave now. Archie, we need to leave right now. They see us. Archie, now!
Archie turned and ran, keeping the camera looking behind himself, clearly showing some of the crazed people taking up the chase. He rushed to the van, throwing the camera to the aide waiting inside, and jumped for the open door as Robert stepped on the gas, gunning for the open road. I leaned forward with my mouth hanging down, not sure what I had just witnessed. I blew some air from my lungs to release the tension and pent-up stress. Rick jumped and turned toward me with a startled look.
Man, you scared the crap out of me, John. That is what I'm talking about. Something weird erupted in Denver, and now the mainstream news outlets are reporting it. They are saying the disease, or whatever it is rushing across the Midwest and will hit the eastern seaboard by this afternoon.
This afternoon? Seems fast, doesn't it?
It's the air travel, John. So many people are commuting to their places of work via air nowadays. It makes it almost impossible to contain the epidemic.
Rick blurted out in rapid-fire bursts.
The wife, kids, and I are leaving now, and we just wanted to make sure you and Hannah were aware of the situation and safely getting out of Dodge, so to speak.
Thanks, Rick. Thank you very much for your concern and help. Yes, I see now what you mean by the apocalypse. It sure would seem to be that way. I was listening yesterday to an alternative news agency, and they were interviewing people who had relatives in Denver and were scared that something was going on. I guess we know now, huh?
Yup, sure do. We are heading north to I-10, then west to Texas, and hopefully down through Mexico to try and escape this situation. If you like, you may join us. It will provide protection and shared help.
Yeah, let me get Hannah, and we'll join you in 30 minutes.
Okay, sounds great. See you in 30.
Rick said as he turned to walk back to his house to collect up his family for the flight out of Dodge. A shiver of nervous anxiety ran from the base of my skull, along the length of my spine, down my legs, and into the floor. I began to shake with the knowing fear that time had potentially run out, and we needed to flee for our lives. I ran up the stairs to the bedroom and found Hannah still asleep, with golden locks of beauty tumbling out onto the pillow. I slowly ran my hand over her shoulder to wake her up. She gradually awoke and smiled at me with questioning eyes.
Good morning, my dear.
Sweetheart, you need to get up now. Something is happening, and we need to leave.
Huh? Leave? Where to?
She asked as she sat up, rubbing her eyes and yawning into the morning air. I was talking with Rick. We watched the news, and you would not believe what happened. Please come downstairs, and I'll show you.
Okay, give me a minute. I need to use the washroom.
She shuffled over to the bathroom. I left for the kitchen to start brewing a pot of coffee. Shortly, she ambled down the stairs, and I gave her a cup of coffee to try and wake her up. We settled in the living room, and I turned on the television to a news broadcast.
This is an official government warning to all citizens of the United States. Stay indoors. Do not, and I repeat, do not go outside. The contagion from Denver has now reached the eastern seaboard and is ravaging Atlanta, New York, Boston, Philadelphia, and Miami. People infected with the disease exhibit rabies-like symptoms. The affliction is highly contagious. Do not approach the infected. If possible, use NBC masks with micron filters to protect yourself. The infected sense movement and will, without provocation, attack anyone unlucky enough to come within their range. If necessary, deadly force should be used to protect yourself. Good luck, America, and may God bless and protect you. Broadcasting live from New York for only God knows how long.
We sat with our coffee mugs in our hands, staring at the television with disbelief. Hannah looked at me with shock and fear registering for the first time on her face. I reached over and took her hand in mine to, hopefully, calm her. We have to leave now, Hannah. This is much too dangerous a situation for us to stay put.
Yes, but the government just told us to stay.
I know, but whatever the government says to do is exactly what we should not do. Remember, they are only people too, and most of the time, they get it wrong. We have to take responsibility for ourselves, sweetheart. The government is not going to do it for us. I smiled and squeezed her hand, letting her know I would protect her with everything I had and everything I could do. Rick asked us to join them when they leave. We agreed to meet 15 minutes from now. Do you think you can be ready by then?
Yes, of course. Okay, no problem.
Hannah said as she rose and moved toward the stairs.
I love you, John. I want you to know that, okay?
My heart swelled up with such emotion that I rose from the chair and kissed her with all my love and passion. She wrapped her arms around me with the same reciprocation. Time for us to leave, I said, as I gently pulled myself from her. 15 minutes later, we pulled out of the garage with the SUV loaded. Thankfully, I had done it the day before and none too soon. Rick and the family were waiting along the sidewalk in their pickup. I rolled down the window. Ready to head out, Rick?
Yep, ready to go, John. You want to follow me?
Go ahead. Lead on, my friend. I reached over and squeezed Hannah's hand and smiled into those beautiful blue eyes. She smiled back with nervous anxiety, placing her right hand over ours, letting me know of her commitment to the flight. Rick slowly moved out and began a journey that would forever change my life.
Chapter 3, John Thraus, ADT-0. The two vehicles moved out at an orderly pace to avoid drawing attention to themselves. Once out of the subdivision, they turned left onto 884 and began to move toward the on-ramp for the I-75 north to Georgia. Soon, however, it became apparent that everyone else had the same idea, and the freeway was packed with vehicles, most traveling at reckless speeds, inviting disaster with each turn of the wheel. John and Hannah followed Rick as close as they dared, while making sure not to hit or be hit by other vehicles. Shortly, the traffic started to slow, and lines of vehicles could be seen idling in all three lanes, waiting for something to happen so the traffic jam could resume its northerly course of movement.
Hey Daryl, roll the window up, will ya? It's too damn hot out, and the air conditioning won't work properly with the window down.
Daryl looked over at Justin with an annoyed expression and slowly rolled the window up. Justin had been bossing Daryl around since they left Miami earlier that morning, and it was beginning to irritate him. He looked down at his hand and opened a Ziploc bag to pull out a joint to calm himself down. With a flick of his Zippo, he lit the joint and sucked in a lung full of the narcotic for a full blast of relaxation.
Want some?
Sure, thanks. And sorry for being such an ass. I'm stressed out by all this zombie stuff on the news. Did you happen to bring any food?
Nope, just the guns. We'll find food along the way. By the way, where are we going?
Not sure yet. Just thought we'd head north for now, to get off the panhandle.
Okay, sounds good to me.
Daryl muttered as he settled back into the seat with a growing sense of calm floating over him. Justin took a long, hard pull on the joint while staring ahead onto the road they called Alligator Alley, and for good reason. Giant gators could be seen sunning themselves along the side of the route between Miami and Fort Myers as it crossed the Everglades National Park. A motorist would most certainly not want to have to stop anywhere near the gators unless he or she had a death wish. Justin flicked on the radio to the liquid metal station and jacked up the volume. Soon he became immersed in the driving beat of the drums and the acid rain of the shredding guitarist's solos. His mind drifted, taking flights of daydreams along the way. Induced by the THC of the marijuana, he continued to smoke as he drove.
Daryl, pass me a bud, will ya? I'm thirsty like a dog.
Daryl passed Justin the beer, and he opened it with a trained flick of his thumb to take a long pull of the nectar of the gods, to quench his raging thirst brought on by the marijuana. At times like those, it is people like Justin and Daryl who seem to emerge from the proverbial woodwork to create more mayhem and anarchy. They thrived on the chaos they left behind. Justin began to feel the effects of the alcohol and marijuana with a slow drooping of his eyes and mouth, a relaxing of his facial muscles, and a release of the built-up tension in his back and legs. As he motored down the highway, his speed crept up past 90 miles per hour, then 100 miles per hour, to finally rest at 120 miles per hour. The road was straight, and the day was clear and dry. The music thumped away in his cerebral cortex, inducing a trance-like state of being in addition to what the beer and joint were able to bring on. Justin rocked his head back and forth as he put both hands on the steering wheel and leaned into the windshield to relax his shoulders. The car moved off the old connector road used for decades by Floridians between Miami and Fort Myers onto 951, then onto the I-75 freeway. His speed did not change much as his trance-like state of mind and body only registered the thumping of the music and the flashing of the trees as they sped by. They passed Naples in a blur, racing down the freeway with not a care in the world. As Justin drove, the joint, still in his right hand, burned down, and ash dropped onto his leg, burning him. With surprise and a knee-jerk reaction from the pain, he looked down and tried to wipe it away, subsequently dropping the joint onto the floor. In a typical self-absorbed style, he bent down, not watching the road, to pick up his prize with care and focused attention. Daryl, sitting in the seat next to him, was sleeping with a serene smile on his face, while trees and poles whipped past in an ever-increasing blur of speed. Justin slowly looked up between the steering wheel and dashboard just as a man walked directly in front of him without looking. Justin whipped the steering wheel counterclockwise to try to miss the fellow, to no avail, while arms and legs hit the hood with a satisfying whack of flesh. The back wheels began to slide, so Justin turned the steering wheel clockwise to counter the movement. However, the rear wheels hit an uplift of concrete, abruptly sending the vehicle into the air with an arc and spin any NFL quarterback would be proud of. All the while, Daryl was slumbering away with a satisfied grin of devilish behavior on his face. Neither men were buckled up, so due to the laws of physics, for each action, there is an opposite and equal reaction. Justin went directly through the front windshield to immediately be squashed by the rolling car, and Daryl, still unconscious from the beer and smoke, hit the pavement with a loud crack of his skull to eventually flip into the ditch as a final resting place. The car was able for a moment to defy gravity and tumble end over end into stalled traffic, coincidentally waiting for clearance on an accident that occurred a couple of miles up the road. Because John and Hannah were directly behind Rick's pickup, the speeding vehicle had first slammed into them, rocketing off at a 55-degree angle, shearing the roof of the SUV off, to finally spin and land directly onto the pickup. John and Hannah were knocked unconscious. Hours later, John came to with a pounding headache and pain shooting through his left arm. He reached over and unbuckled his seatbelt, lessening the pain while he rested his head on the steering wheel. Shortly, he lifted his head to see if Hannah was all right, and to his shock and dismay, she was gone. With shaking hands of adrenaline-induced shock, he slowly extricated himself from the vehicle to stand on wobbly legs of rubber. The world spun for a moment as he looked around, surveying the carnage, to finally fix his gaze upon the wreckage in front of him. He slowly walked over, taking in the scene with horror as it began to dawn on him that Rick and his family had been killed by the vehicle that had plowed into him. John peered into the twisted, mangled mass of metal and flesh to be certain that no one had survived such an accident. He looked up and around, trying to see if there was anyone to help. However, the highway was devoid of people, with only the remnants of destroyed vehicles and bodies lying about as testimony to the violent destruction upon them. He called out for Hannah as fear crept into his heart. His eyes moved from side to side with stress-induced anxiety, looking for his wife. Nothing was heard or seen. He moved along the highway, searching through vehicles, peering into each one, hoping beyond hope she was found. Eventually, he returned to his truck and rummaged around for his backpack and weapons. He left the highway to follow the turnoff to head back to his house, thinking perhaps Hannah had gone back to retrieve something or to get the other vehicle. That did not make much sense. However, to John, in his current state of mind, it made perfect sense. He walked the 5.5 miles back to his house, taking the rest of the day because he needed to rest every 200 to 300 yards to catch his breath and steady his equilibrium. At sundown, he arrived to find the house was quiet and empty. He searched the premises and finally accepted the fact that Hannah had disappeared. He opened a can of beans and settled in front of the television to watch the news and catch up on the latest developments.
Ladies and gentlemen, breaking news from our correspondent, Eliza Thompson. Eliza, what do you have for us on the situation?
It is not pretty, Don. Mayhem is everywhere here in Denver and now spreading across the country in successive waves of violence and destruction. Behind me, you can see the fires of the Denver suburbs. The electricity is down and the city is eerily quiet now. Whereas hours ago, raging storms of death-dealing mobs moved about with impunity. The National Guard was dispatched and seemed to bring everything under control, but sporadic clashes can be heard now and then.
Have you talked with anyone from the National Guard?
Yes, Colonel Jackson graciously allowed me to interview him. He mentioned that the situation for now is under control as it seemed the mobs of violence seekers were dispersed. He is not sure where they have gone, but he assured me the National Guard is on high alert.
Good, thank you, Eliza. We now turn our attention to our New York correspondent, Jeremy Turner. Jeremy, what do you have for us in New York?
It is complete mayhem, Don. The crowds have gone wild, looting and killing. We are stuck here on Tower 9 in downtown Manhattan, and as you can see, the whole city is blacked out with fires raging in various parts. It is a complete breakdown of law and order.
Have you been able to discern what the cause is and how it is spreading?
No. The CDC is lost as to what is causing this epidemic of violence and destruction. The military has no idea what is going on, and the politicians are blaming each other. So no one can put forth a clear understanding of the cause, the purpose, and the final eventuality of this calamity.
The news anchor sighed with clear anxiety and fear written across his face as the camera zoomed in to catch his final remarks.
Well, there it is, folks. We do not know what is happening or why, but there is irrefutable proof that something extraordinary is occurring, and it stems from Denver. No one seems to know what is going on. We cannot determine if it is biological, chemical, or radiological. It is most disconcerting, to say the least.
John reached for the remote and shut the television off. The night was silent as humanity devolved into fear and chaos. He stood up and shuffled off to bed to try and get some sleep. But the knot in his stomach squeezed harder, almost making him throw up. Slowly, he made his way toward the bedroom. The next day, he was feeling much better and readied himself to continue the search for Hannah. The car was still in the garage, so John climbed in and backed out to embark on a journey so extraordinary it would seem to defy all logic. He drove throughout the area of Fort Myers and Cape Coral, searching the strip malls, parking lots, and occasionally houses. Many people were still occupying their residences. However, more and more were leaving to God knew where. John had to be careful, as many of the people were scared to death and ready to shoot first and ask questions later. For 5 days, John searched with no clue to Hannah's whereabouts. He posted notices on light poles and the windows of the malls to let Hannah know he was alive and to meet him in front of the Target store they frequently shopped at. Every day he waited for her, but nothing replied nor arrived until the 3rd day. While sitting on a bench in front of the Target store, 4 young men walked toward John with a hungry intent. John put his hand into his pant pocket and wrapped it around the grip of the Glock 45, ready to whip it out at a moment's notice.
Hey, old man, what are you doing here?
A young man in the lead eventually stood in front of John while he remained seated on the bench.
Minding my own business,
John said as he slowly withdrew the gun and laid it on his lap for all to see.
Hey, we don't want any trouble, mister. We just thought you needed some help.
No, don't need any help.
Why are you sitting here then? Waiting for someone, perhaps?
Nope. Just taking a rest for these weary bones and enjoying the sunshine, that's all.
John replied as he slowly looked up to the sky and down to the young man sitting beside him.
Is there something I can help you gentlemen with?
Well, you see, We need that gun of yours to protect ourselves with. And we are hoping you may want to sell it or trade it?
Sorry guys, no can do. I need this to protect myself. However, I am sure one of the gun stores that are not looted or still open may sell you one.
We went to them all, and none are open. The stores are all closed up tighter than a knothole in a deep freeze.
He replied as the other three men started to slowly encircle John, cutting off his ability to target all of them simultaneously.
Guys, this is not the time nor the place to be trying this. If you make a move for my gun, I will kill one or two of you before you can subdue me. Is that acceptable to you?
With a snarl, a man standing beside John lunged for the pistol, only to wind up with a hole in his chest. Blood and gore sprayed out behind him and landed on a companion standing behind and to his left. John continued to swing around and fired off 2 shots into the abdomen of the man to his left, knocking him down with a decisive blow. Continuing the swing to the left and throwing his body over the dead man beside the bench, John blasted a neat hole of death into the third man standing directly behind him. The tactical training he had taken over the years was money and time well spent. 3 men were down, and the 4th realized his odds, turned, and ran away. John lowered his pistol and stared after the fleeing man, shaking his head in disgust as the realization of the new world he was now living in dawned on him. With that in mind, he began to despair at the possibility of never finding Hannah and the probable outcome of her situation. He slowly turned, his shoulders drooping, and let out a deep sigh of grief and regret. Chapter 4. Dr. Milson, ADT-12.
Anton, what are you doing?
I am running the diagnostics for the particle accelerator, as you requested, Dr. Milson.
Like the Hadron Collider, operated by CERN in Geneva, Switzerland, the particle accelerator was 3,000 feet below ground in Colorado. It was appropriated and built by the U.S. military in the early 1990s as a result of excessive public scrutiny surrounding the Area 51 site. Moving the equipment and personnel was not the problem. Getting the site prepared was. Dr. Milson was the progenitor of the design, viability, implementation, and subsequent operational aspects of the military's investment. The particle accelerator was designed to find the God particle, or Higgs boson, the very essence of life, creation, and evolution. The energy that flowed out of all matter into the formation of the various entities the universe displayed was the energy the military wanted to harness for its continued viability. What was a military if not for the political and economic use of the powers that be? And it was the military's responsibility to address that need continuously. The demilitarization of sovereign states and the organization of a standing UN army had been agreed upon through various UN ratifications and treaties. However, it was never the U.S. military's goal to fall into oblivion and uselessness. The UN was not going to tell the U.S. what it could and could not do. No, sir, no one was going to tell the U.S. what to do. So the mine site was bought, the accelerator was installed, and testing started.
The diagnostics all test positive, Dr. Milson. Do you want to proceed?
No. Let's recheck it in the simulator. It never hurts to check and check again.
An aide rushed into the diagnostics room with a flustered air, waiting impatiently for Dr. Milson to notice her and grant her an audience.
What is it, Catherine?
You have an urgent request, Dr. Milson.
I have no time for any request. Forward it to Dr. Straum.
I am sorry, sir, but this cannot wait, and it cannot be delegated to anyone else at the order of the President, sir.
Dr. Milson turned and looked at her while taking his glasses off. He squinted and shook his head with an air of frustration. Turning, he walked down the stairs and across the room toward the aide. She gently took him by the arm and escorted him back to the administration area for his meeting. Standing tall and ramrod straight, Master Sergeant Francis Jacobian saluted Dr. Milson with a snap of his arm and a twist of his wrist. Having entered the service at the ripe old age of 18, Francis had served in Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, and finally North Korea. The lines on his face reflected the trials and tribulations that had befallen him in those conflicts of body and character. Having earned the Purple Heart for the distinction of bravery while under direct enemy fire, he was a man to be reckoned with. An air of authority emanated from his core fiber, permeating all those coming into contact with him, resulting in the respect that was both earned and given freely by all.
Hello, Thraxis.
Francis, what a pleasant surprise. I am so happy to see you. What brings you here?
Dr. Milson respectfully asked while grasping Francis in a firm handshake.
Presidential Directive Thraxis, the highest order. Please sit. I will debrief and bring you up to speed. I am certain you are already aware that the global economic and political power base has shifted over the past 40 years in a direction that threatens the stability of the globalization efforts of the G8. China, Russia, and India, with a combined population exceeding 2.5 billion, have formed a Pan-Asian alliance. That alliance is issuing its reserve currency, threatening the very financial, political, and military might and viability of the Anglo-American global domination. Thraxis, we are now at the crossroads of decision. The Chinese have announced they have harnessed fusion as a viable and alternative energy source, thus eliminating the need for fossil fuels. Since the US dollar is the reserve currency for oil, the new power puts pressure on its continued viability as a reserve currency. Those steps by the Pan-Asian Three jeopardize the global economic structure in a way that could destroy the Anglo-American power base. Also, it seems the Catholic Church, along with Islam, is exerting increasing pressure on the UN and the Pan-Asian Three to accept one or the other as the world's religion ordained by God itself. This is unacceptable as it is America's right to choose, not the Catholic Church or the Imams of Islam. The President has decided it is time to move your experiments to the next phase. We need to demonstrate to the world the power of manifest destiny. It is America's destiny to lead the world toward a future of peace and security. We cannot allow China, Russia, and India to dictate our God-given right.
Move the experimental dates up in the timeline.
Yes, we must be able to both provide a power source of means, and yet a power base of substance.
We have not had enough time to even work out the source codes to any degree of finality. How do you expect us to determine, let alone harness, the extraordinary energy of those particles within the current framework? I'll need at least 5 to 10 years even to begin the process of elimination and the structuring of a foundation to work upon.
Thraxis, you are a man of ingenuity, intelligence, and deep capability. I am confident you will find a way to address the issues. The President has allocated all the funding you require and the necessary manpower to complete the job. Our very existence as a nation and people is threatened to be overrun by the impoverished masses of the Third World if we do not provide the carrot and the stick. You, Thraxis, are our hope. Please, do not fail us, my friend.
He continued for an hour, briefing Thraxis on the current global political situation and outlining the tasks the U.S. military wanted him to undertake. Dr. Milson sat quietly, and once finished, Francis turned and marched out of the office back toward the elevator to the surface. Deep in thought, Thraxus pondered the ramifications of those words and the effect they would have on society, perhaps the whole world, in the days to come. Thraxus earned his first PhD in particle physics at the age of 22, his second PhD in molecular biology at the age of 27, and his third PhD in molecular physics at the age of 30. He was a man of depth. He knew the price that could potentially be paid if they rushed into that experiment without proper time and process. Science was not exact, but the results were, even though they sometimes came with unexpected consequences. Frowning, Dr. Milson leaned over, picked up the phone, and dialed.
Hello, Father Dumont. This is Thraxus Milson calling. How are you today?
Well, Doctor, if you were a physician, I would have much to complain about. However, since you are a physicist, my complaints are relative to the matter at hand.
Father Dumont smiled into the phone while reaching for a cigarette.
Father, we need to step up the theoretical timeline towards practical initiation. What is your time expectation on implementing the fractation process?
Dr. Milson asked, while chuckling at the joke.
Well, with the assistance of the German Particle Physics Administration, we believe the accelerator can be in operation within 3 years. However, that is being extremely optimistic, Dr. Milson. As you know, there are many issues we need to address first. Why do you ask?
Father, we must meet soon. Are you able to meet with me in London 2 days from now?
Dr. Milson requested, with a slow knot of anxiety moving down from his neck and settling between his shoulder blades.
Yes, Doctor. Of course. I will be there.
Father Dumont replied with an uneasy feeling of dread falling into his lap and slowly climbing its way up toward the middle of his forehead. With that, Dr. Milson put the receiver down and paged Catherine to make arrangements for the meeting in London with Father Dumont. It was not a meeting he relished. He wished he did not have to have it, as it could have the potential for disaster and massive political. Chapter 5. Dr. Milson, ADT-10. After arriving at Heathrow 2 days after his call to Father Dumont, Dr. Milson hired a taxi to take him to the Sheraton Park Tower in central London. Upon checking in, Thraxus called Father Dumont to make sure he had arrived and was available for lunch the following day. With that out of the way, Thraxus went over his notes and then lay down to catch up on his sleep. The great clock of time ticked away in Thraxus' mind, keeping him awake, thinking about the possibilities of moving up the implementation date of the quark accelerator.
The particles involved with quarks are not understood. This is theoretical work, not a practical application program. What is the military thinking? The accelerator is not in full operational mode. The checks and tests have not been run. This is unfamiliar territory that no one can anticipate the outcome of.
Dr. Milson thought to himself. The scientific community hypothesized that those particles are the actual energy used to form all matter. They could shapeshift, move in and out of reality, oppose any force placed on them, and if modern particle physics was correct, that energy could rip apart all physical matter, even time itself. If the universe were consistent in its makeup, particles would be the very essence of black holes. Quasars, Type 2, 1b and 1c, supernovas, as well as neutron stars, one of the effects of a supernova. Those celestial bodies were formed as a result of collapsing atoms, which either fused or broke apart the various particles that make up the atoms. That was nature to the extreme. The destruction of matter and the reorganization of atoms for the recreation of the universe. New stars, solar systems, and galaxies were born that way. However, the makeup of the particular energy associated with each particle was unknown, as were the results of tampering with it. The scientific community had isolated and identified all the particles involved, which contained 3 for further study. However, the military wanted Thraxus to contain all the particles and to put them into an energy consumption application.
The question is, how to draw that energy off the particles safely and practically. What is the makeup of the particles themselves? Where does this energy come from? Or what is the cause? Also, with recombination, what other forms of subatomic particles could be created? What would the outcome be?
He thought to himself, there were too many questions haunting Thraxus, preventing him from falling asleep. The next day, he met with Father Dumont at the Wellesley restaurant for a late lunch.
Ah, Father Dumont, it is so good to see you again. Thank you for coming.
Yes, and it is good to see you again, Thraxus.
Father Dumont replied while shaking Thraxus's hand and sitting himself down. Father Dumont had been a particle physicist before becoming a priest. It was the realization of the complexity of matter that convinced Father Dumont of the existence of creation and a divine being, or God. Evolution had been his God, and it was the reason for his decision to go into particle physics. However, the more he learned and studied, the more the inescapable conclusion became apparent. Humanity's reality could not have evolved by chance. It was and is much too complex. The question begged to be answered, where did the energy come from in the first place? For every answer, thousands of questions were raised, giving rise to the theological conclusion in Father Dumont's mind of a divine being of origin. That did not run counter to serious scientific study on his part, as he was always fascinated and intrigued by the physical and non-physical makeup of the universe. His studies, conducted on behalf of the Catholic Church, aimed to bring clarity to scriptural thought, to prove God's existence, and to establish the Church's divine right of representation. As a result of the ecumenical movement over the past 80 years, the Church has been working with Protestant, Muslim, Hindu, and Buddhist religious organizations to demonstrate that their doctrines are all paths to God and lead to heightened spiritual clarity.
Father, our organizations have collaborated closely now for 10, 12 years. And in all of those years, we have worked hard to ascertain the origin of our universe, have we not?
Yes, of course, Thraxus. My friend, please, where are you going with this?
I have been given a directive by the President of the United States to shorten the research and development program by a magnitude of order and begin to provide a tangible, realistic application of the studies in question. However, I do not believe it to be realistic or safe.
I was wondering what the importance of our meeting was about.
Yes, it is insurmountable, I believe, without the Church's involvement and support. We need to work closely together before other factions of today's world grasp the so-called proverbial energy ring.
Thraxus sighed and leaned back in his chair, with worry creasing his brow as he looked intently into Father Dumont's eyes.
I see. This can be extremely dangerous, Thraxus. What if the results are not what we expect? What if the results embolden the current Anglo-American hegemony into further world dominance? Where does this lead humanity? The Church is already getting pressure from the current administration regarding its various theological orders and to curb our rhetoric on spiritual and religious matters. It does not go down well with the Vatican, nor with the more than 1.2 billion adherents worldwide. Would this play into their hand, hence allowing for a more secular, centrist societal power base, one without the will of God involved?
I understand. Yes, it is very disconcerting. It is much better to diversify the power base, hence not allowing one faction to overwhelm the others and concentrate its power, thus achieving hegemony. I am just not sure what to do.
Listen, my friend, this is not insurmountable and is not lost on the conscience of the Church. As a result of Christianity's influence worldwide, we have a virtual theocracy of over 4 billion adherents. Do you think we cannot influence their outlook and hence put pressure back into the laps of the various national administrations?
Father, this research needs to be in the hands of a more responsible and accountable organization, one that answers to God and the people, not to unelected, hence unaccountable bureaucrats. I am a scientist, not a politician. However, I have seen how politics can be hijacked by special interest groups and manipulated to take actions contrary to the public's needs. This research is much too important to be in the hands of a group that can be manipulated or coerced by any means. We must work closely together and make sure no one organization can dictate the outcome or use of this research.
Yes, Thraxis, I wholeheartedly agree with you. What do you propose?
We need to align our research teams and move in the same direction with the same purpose at the same time. We need to share all information about the day-to-day research results, but create a third, more clandestine group outside of the regular circles of collaboration, whereby we can keep the data collected safe and decide what to disseminate to the various organizations that demand it, as well as for real-world applications. What do you think, Father?
Risky but doable. Risky but doable. Where do you propose we create this third party and store the data?
Perhaps we use the Islamic site in Mecca on the Arabian Red Sea coast.
Father Dumont looked down while rubbing his chin and nodding his head in agreement. Thraxis leaned forward, looking intently at Father Dumont's posture to determine his demeanor.
Yes, I think that could work. I'll have to quietly seek an audience with Alim Abdul Aziz Khalifa for approval and organization of the scientists to be involved. But it could be done. This will need to be facilitated through the back channels of the Church, however, with the approval of the Holy Father. The Jesuits are very adept at this and will provide assistance, I am sure, once I outline the purpose and demonstrate the upside to the Church.
Father Dumont replied while running his fingers through his hair and staring out the window of the restaurant.
Good. I'll take that as a tacit agreement to our discussion and begin the process of channeling our data to correspond to both our needs and the overall direction of this endeavor.
Thraxis said as he extended his hand to Father Dumont to seal the terms and let him know of his deep conviction in the arrangement above. They had their lunch and discussed more mundane global issues and their impact on Christianity and the Anglo-American political base. Upon finishing their food and discussion, the two of them stood up to leave.
Thraxis, I will call you to let you know the outcome of my inquiries and discussions within the next day or two. Goodbye, my friend, and God bless you.
Father Dumont said as he grasped Thraxis's hand and held it in a steady grip of honest concern for their friendship. With that, they left the restaurant and headed back to their hotels, subsequently traveling to their respective scientific research facilities to further the understanding of human origins and to try to keep the powers that be